Joined now by Ernie Birchmeier. He's the livestock and dairy specialist at the Michigan Farm Bureau, talking about the continued impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and more on Michigan's farming industry. Ernie, thanks for being with us again.
Good morning. It's great to be with you. Appreciated the two previous segments. I tuned in a bit early, if you will, and connected a bit early, and really appreciated the dialogue on the big weekend's football game. So that was kind of fun to listen to. It's great to be with you this morning.
Thanks. Appreciate having you on. Yeah, it's an exciting time here in Michigan on the sports side, and it's also an exciting time in our farming industry as well. But let's start off with a little more of a gloomy question. We've seen the COVID-19 impact continue to have a significant impact on a number of different industries, certainly restaurants and retail and on the staffing front, but just in general in their operations as well. Is that the same case in the farming industry? Is it continuing to have a major impact, or are things a little bit more back to a sense of normalcy in Michigan's farming industry?
Well, certainly agriculture was not without its challenges during the pandemic, but I always remind people first and foremost, our farmers never quit farming. They do that on a daily basis, whether they're dealing with, we're dealing with the pandemic or other challenges that face our industry. In the springtime, crops have to be planted. In the fall, they have to be harvested. Livestock need to be taken care of. The dairy cattle need to be milked. Our fruit and vegetable industry continue to prosper. But so things continue to happen on the farm, at the farm level. But we certainly saw supply chain disruptions within the industry. We've dealt with labor issues just like many business and industries have here in Michigan and across the United States. But we continue to find a way to work through those. Those supply chain disruptions do have an impact on marketing of our commodities, at the farm level. But we continue to work through those. When processing plants are shut down, we've got nowhere to go with the livestock that we're producing, and or the fruit and vegetables that we're producing here in our great state. So there is an impact.
We're joined by Ernie Birchmeier, livestock and dairy specialist at the Michigan Farm Bureau, joining us today on the Megacast. There appears to be a promising new vaccine for the African swine fever. Are you hopeful about those breakthroughs in those vaccines and other vaccines that may help with our livestock here in Michigan?
Sure. If we can get a vaccine finalized and approved for African swine fever, that will be a breakthrough for our nation's swine industry and really the swine population across the world. African swine fever is a very deadly disease that transfers from animal to animal. It is very contagious. Fortunately, we have never had African swine fever here in the United States. We need to keep it out. We want to keep it out, but it has moved closer to our shores. So the work that our researchers are doing, at national animal health labs around the country, especially out at Plum Island, in the eastern part of the United States and in our country's midsection, hopefully will prove very valuable and rewarding in the development of that vaccine. We have learned through the pandemic that we can speed up the process, if you will, of the development of, in this case, animal health protection tools versus the human health protection tools. Speed up that process and speed up the approval process, because many times we get products that have been developed, but the approval process takes some time. So hopefully we can learn from this past year in terms of how we can speed that process up, but do our due diligence within the industry, do our due diligence and due diligence from those that are making the decisions in the development of important animal health protection tools.
We're joined by Ernie Birchmeier, livestock and dairy specialist at the Michigan Farm Bureau, joining us on the Megacast. And as technology becomes a more critical part of our daily lives and of a number of different industries, really every industry in some way currently is impacted by technology or relies heavily on technology. The same goes as we go along in the agricultural industry. That brings up some concerns about the work of cyber criminals and the necessity of improved cybersecurity. What's really being discussed in the agricultural industry, particularly here in Michigan, on the cybersecurity front, and how much of a critical factor is that in the future of our agricultural industry?
That's a great question, and it's a challenging topic as well for all to deal with. I look at cybersecurity and the importance of cybersecurity in a farm operations, an additional step in biosecurity. Our farmers take great pride and put in place great measures to protect their farm operations from outside diseases or concerns coming on, and cybersecurity is another step in that process. And with the technology that we have, with the way that we're all connected, with the amount of work that's done, from the computer or the iPad or your phone, the concern continues to increase, if you will, about outside people impacting what we do on a daily basis. So we need to do our due diligence within agriculture, just like every other business and industry needs to do their due diligence in terms of protecting the data that we have, protecting our farm operations, and keeping our business and industries moving forward. We've recently seen cybersecurity attacks in the meatpacking industry and other segments of agriculture. When those happen, there is an immediate impact on farm at the farm level. If livestock are scheduled to be sent to a processing plant on a particular day and that plant comes under attack, those livestock have to stay on the farm operation longer. It costs farmers more money to feed them every day when they could have been sent for harvest or processing, and the system backs up. We've built and developed a just-in-time food system in this country. It's how we've been operating for quite some time. And when that just-in-time food system gets backed up, there are economic consequences that come into play.
We're joined by Ernie Birchmeier. He is the livestock and dairy specialist at the Michigan Farm Bureau, joining us on the Megacast. So for these cyber criminals, and it's going to be different case to case, but in the agricultural industry, what are some of the areas right now, or the technologies right now in your industry that are more commonly being targeted, or that the agricultural industry in the state of Michigan and the U.S. across the world are seeing more commonly being targeted by these criminals right now?
Well, the meat processing industry is one that's been targeted. We know that it's happened, in the last couple of months. And most of the time, the cybersecurity attackers are not wanting to shut the industry down. They want money. Let's just be honest. That's why they create these attacks. It's all about finances. So the processing industry is one that gets looked at and watched very, very closely. No different than our bank accounts every day. We've got to keep close eye on that. So we've got to do the same thing, at the farm level and through the processing and distribution level. Another area that is a concern is distribution. We need to make sure that we have trucks and rails and that continue to operate. We're seeing backups, obviously, in the ports. That's a different issue. But you can see how quickly our system can get backed up when we've got a chink in the armor, so to speak, or one of the links of our chain breaks. It backs up the industry. I always tell people when discussing this issue, wouldn't it be amazing if those that are doing illegal activity would have put as much effort and energy into doing productive and honest activity for our society? How much better off we would all be. So they're criminal attacks. It's all about money, and we all need to be diligent.
And everybody does, whether it's in the agricultural industry or another industry or just individuals. These cyber attacks are going to become more common. These cyber criminals attacking with ransomware especially, but other forms of cybersecurity threats are only going to become more common over time as we start to rely more on technology and interconnection of industries and of people through the web. We're joined by Ernie Birchmeier. He is the livestock and dairy specialist at the Michigan Farm Bureau, joining us on the Megacast. And you talked a little bit about distribution and some of the other issues that are affecting that end of our agricultural business. The first thing that comes to mind would be staffing, and especially for those truck drivers that are distributing the livestock and are distributing those processed meats and the other crops across the state and across the U.S. After they've been processed and getting them to the clients. That's been an issue across the board for a number of different industries in the food industry and the retail food industry. But has staffing also continued to be a concern in the agricultural business for our farms and for these distribution businesses as well going forward, or has that started to alleviate a little bit?
Sure. Well, labor issues are pretty common in agriculture. Our farm operations are constantly seeking labor. We've had labor shortages, especially in harvesting of our fruit and vegetable industry and processing of our fruit and vegetable industry. So we continue to deal with that issue. We need an abundant legal workforce in this country to help with the production and processing of our food industry. You know, food is one thing that impacts every person in this country 3 or 4 times a day, depending on how many times, you decide to consume something every day. And it has to be grown, it has to be harvested, it has to be processed, and it has to be distributed. So we need a reliable workforce in our industry. We continue to work on that from a Farm Bureau standpoint. Several years ago, we started a new company called Great Lakes Ag Labor Services, where we bring in H-2A labor for our farm operations and manage that program for our farmers. So we are working through the tools that are available, but we also need immigration reform in this country. We need reform in terms of the ability to bring in foreign workers and make it more accessible to our farm operations so that they have access to that labor. So it's a complicated system, it's a complicated approach, but the bottom line is there are jobs in our industry that need to be done. Many people don't realize this, but approximately 24% of all workers and jobs in our state are in one way or another tied to our food industry. When you think about everything from the farm level all the way to the retail sales of our food products, nearly a quarter of all of the workforce in Michigan is in one way or another tied to agriculture. So we need a reliable workforce at all levels.
We're joined by Ernie Birchmeier. He is the livestock and dairy specialist at the Michigan Farm Bureau, joining us today on the Megacast. Just a few more minutes left with you, Ernie. At this moment in time, what are some other key factors that are affecting our agricultural industry or important information that our audience should be familiar with or understanding about the way that our agricultural industry continues to be impacted by COVID-19, the ways it's changing around the pandemic and outside of pandemic factors at this time?
Sure. I'm going to start with one outside of the pandemic factor that most of your listeners and viewers won't think about a lot because they don't experience it every day. But, we have a crop that needs to be harvested out around the state right now, and the weather is impacting that a great deal. Our farmers go through great lengths to put a crop in the ground in the springtime, rely on Mother Nature to provide the necessary rain, and right temperatures and conditions for that crop to grow in. But then we also need the right weather and temperatures and sunshine in the fall to get that crop harvested. And if we've paid attention to the weather here throughout the month of October, we've seen a tremendous amount of rain. And that's really impacted the ability for our farmers to get that crop out of the field. And really getting that crop out of the field is the income that they receive for their work during the year. So we kind of need Mother Nature to turn off the faucet, if you will, and provide us some sunshine and drier weather so we can get that crop harvested. Because if you don't, that leads to shortages in the supply chain and shortages in terms of feed for our livestock, and those all add up to additional challenges for our farm operations. So we need some cooperative weather, if you will, to get these crops harvested and get them out of the field. So that's a big issue. Certainly the supply chain issue is impacting agriculture just like it is everyone else. Due to supply chain issues, consumers are going to see higher costs for their food when they go fill the grocery cart. There's already discussions about the Thanksgiving dinner being more expensive and shortages, not because the farms aren't producing, but because we have distribution and supply chain issues. There's a tremendous shortage of truckers around the country right now. People that drive those semi trucks up and down the road every day that we see when we're on the highways. There's a shortage of those. We rely very heavily on the trucking industry to distribute our food products across this country. So there's a shortage there. Certainly, we have elected officials in our state. We have elected officials in Washington, D.C. That we have to work very closely with to make sure that they aren't passing policies or laws or regulations that impact what we do on a daily basis for our farm operations. Because anytime a regulation is passed, that typically means more cost to the farmer. And the farmer can't necessarily pass that cost of regulation on like many other business and industries do, because in agriculture, you're a price taker and not a price maker. And by that, I mean, we operate in a free market system, and what the market will pay that day, for the most part, is what you're going to get for the commodity that you're selling. Versus take the automotive industry or the clothing industry, there's a price tag hanging on that. And you pay what that price tag says when you go to buy that good and good or service. And agriculture's not that way at the farm level. So rules, regulations, legislation, and additional taxes all cost farmers more money. So we need to keep an eye on that very closely as well. We are all better off in our country and in our society when we sit down across the table and work through issues, because we all have different opinions. They all matter. And the way one person views addressing an issue may be viewed differently by someone else. And if we can sit down and collaborate and work through those challenges, especially those impacting our agriculture industry, our farmers are going to be better off. And then ultimately our consumers are going to be better off. We're very fortunate to have the most abundant and affordable and safe food supply in the world, and our farmers are glad to produce that on a daily basis.
Well, Ernie, thank you very much for keeping us updated on the agricultural industry as we continue through this pandemic, as well as other issues that are affecting our farms and our farmers and our other industries that they work with as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.